There are some folk that just think they crash, and they just come on and come, whether they have said they coming or not. They plan at the last minute, and they show up, and sometimes you are not ready for them. The last time I remember that our family had a discussion around this was when my daughter, Brittany, and her wonderful husband, Ron, got married. There were many questions as to, well, how many people would show up at the reception? And I would tell you, no matter what you tell people, there's always somebody that does not follow instructions. And you will find people that will show up even though they did not reserve a space. Now, in some places, if you didn't reserve a place, you won't have one when you get there. One of the conversations that Dr. Larry Swain and I had before he left as the executive minister for the Ohio American Baptist churches, he said that we were going to have to possibly do away with the banquet during our annual gathering. He said one of the reasons that he might have to do away with the banquet is that people would show up that did not reserve. And then some people would show up, find an empty seat, eat, and not pay. And I said to him, I said, you know, what that is you're not quite as aggressive as African American preachers. I said, because when we have a convention, there are tickets, and we check them at the door. So there are some places where you will not get in unless you have responded properly. Let me tell you that heaven is like that. All of us needs to reserve a space. Because if you live life like the ant and not like, or like the grasshopper and not the ant, what you're going to find out is that the season is going to change. The Bible says that someday there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth because somebody didn't respond s'il vous plaît. You did not respond to the heed and the call of the gospel. And so for just a few minutes, let's think about how to RSVP with God. Jesus tells in Matthew chapter 22 a story of a king who prepares a meal, and he sends for the folks that he knows to come to the wedding feast. There's a marriage that's taking place, and the king has invited a specific people to come and to dine with him. He sent his servants out to invite them. As Jesus talks, he says in verse 2 that the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king which made a marriage for his son. One thing that you need to do in order to RSVP with God is you never reject king-made. You never reject king-made. I had to laugh a few months ago as one of the leaders of this country, namely the one who is supposed to be president, stood up and said that we needed to buy in the USA, made in the USA, and the reporters had them all because they brought all of the products up that he has created himself outside of the USA. I will tell you that this whole USA Made in America movement is one that is germane and central, especially to African Americans and African American old men. Now, I won't qualify what an African American old man is, but you can just put your age to it if you want. But I will tell you that my grandfather and my great-grandfather and old black men used to say, you gotta buy American made. Some of those old dudes wouldn't even think about driving a Lexus, Mercedes, Toyota, Honda, or any of those things. If it was not Chevy, Buick, or Ford, you could forget it. Because they were always going to buy American made. When I was a boy in high school, my grandmother set out to buy us a car. She was very crafty that way. They didn't think I should have a car in high school, so she said, I'm going to buy a car and let you use it. I love my grandmother. And so as we began to look for cars, I had my eye, and for those of you who are old enough, I had my eye on a Datsun Z. You remember that Datsun Z? That thing was beautiful. I had my eye on that, and she found one that was real nice, and she was ready to buy it, and my grandfather said, foreign made. You need to buy something American made. Well, you know, I love my grandmother. Did she put a trick on him? My first car was a Camaro. American made. So years ago, older black folk definitely said it had to be American made. They felt that deep in their bones because many of us had migrated from Alabama and West Virginia and other places, had gone north, and some of them folk were living up in the north. I won't tell you the state, but the name of the city is Detroit. And they would go up there and they would get jobs working for General Motors and others, and so therefore we had a sense of pride in the American factory. Let me tell you that we have found out that there is a decline in the economy simply because we're buying too many products that are made by foreign nations. That is true. The fact is, you need to support your own, and you need to have some trust in the stuff that you make. I'm always suspect as I hear about leaders in our school system who lead the public system but send their kids off to private school. You ought to realize that we need to have faith in those who are creating the stuff in our country. Now let me tell you that if I believe and if our older folk believe that we ought to trust in the stuff that we make, then what do you think about the stuff that the king makes? Fact is, this king said he had made a marriage for his son. He had created, he had developed. He is, in fact, what we call now the hospitality specialist. He is the one who is putting things together. He is the coordinator, if you will. If you are summoned by God to something that God has created and orchestrated, something that God has made, then you ought to realize and believe that you best accept his offer. God is much more than the Godfather. The Godfather makes offers that you cannot refuse. God not only makes an offer that we cannot refuse, he has made us. So therefore, we ought to be glad in the day that he calls us, rejoice in the fact that he's made us, and wonderfully has he made us. God made us so wonderful and so beautiful and took the time out to create us that we realize that in 6 days he created everything that he made. On that last day he was busy making us, and he rested the next day. Don't you know? In my mind, I think if you got to take a day of rest, you must have really went out with a blast. And so he made us, he created us, and he did a wonderful job. When he calls us to himself, we ought to be excited about anything that God creates. There's some people that just create wonderful and beautiful things that you just want to see. You know, Vera Wayne makes a wedding dress. You want to see that kind of thing. You know, you want to see the kind of events that are put on by wonderful and great people. And so if God has created something, you ought not ever reject it. Never reject what the king has made. The other thing in verse 5, you see it says, but they made light of it, the invitation that they were given. The king called them to this wedding, and it said in verse 4 that he sent forth the servant. He said, tell them, behold, I've prepared my dinner. My ox and my fatlings are killed, and things are ready. Come to the marriage. But in verse 5 it says, but they made light of it and went their way, one to his farm, another to his merchandise. You need to beware of making light. You need to beware of making light. Don't you know that if God has created something, that number one, it is worth us being there, but number two, never make light of, never decide that what God is doing is not important in your life. What God is doing is always important in our life. We ought to always be concerned about what God is doing. We shouldn't make fun of, we should not decide that we have something else to do. For my young folk, for the young people in this church, oftentimes I know kind of what some of our young people think because I used to be young. Now oftentimes what you feel like when you're young is I got time. I got time to get this done later on in life. I can go to church when I get old. Right now it's party time. I can acknowledge God, and I can read my Bible when I get older, because right now it's grind and hustle time. I'm trying to make my money, and I'm trying to be like Snoop Dogg, trying to keep it on my mind. But let me tell you that you better correct yourself right now and realize that you shouldn't make light of the things of God. God has made all of us, and young people are dying just as quick as old people nowadays. You got to realize that there's some people that didn't wake up this morning, and you can look around and realize that their time is now over. And so the question for you and the question for me is whether or not we really believe that God is coming back again, that Jesus will someday come out of the heavens and come to collect us, that they could be even this afternoon. Because he said he'll come like a thief in the night. We don't know when the Lord is going to return. What we do know is that he will return. And the fact is, you should ask yourself the question, what will you be doing when he returns? Will you be sexing somebody else's wife when he returns? Will you be drunk as a skunk and crazy when he returns? Will you be lying and thieving and cheating when he returns? What will you do when he returns? Or are you just playing the fiddle like Nero when Rome was on fire? Question is, are we really ready, or are we just playing the game? And as one songwriter said, not gospel songwriter, but are we merely faking the funk? What are you doing? What are you doing to get ready? Have you reserved your space, or is it just one of those things that I've been invited? He stands at the door and knocking. I'm going to leave him out there for now. You've got to RSVP with God. You can't reject what he's made. You've got to realize that we shouldn't make light of. We should not think that God is not important. But then if you look at verses 6 through 7, you realize that not only did some of them make light of it, but some of them also, the Bible says, and the remnant took his servants and treated them, they treated them spitefully, and they slew them. They beat up the folks who came and told them that they were invited to the feast. They destroyed them, and they worked on them and hurt them. And so what happens, as you see there in verse 7, that the king heard of it, and he was mad, and he sent forth armies and destroyed and murdered and burnt up their cities. Fact is, you've got to realize that you can't hurt the messenger. Sometimes we get mad because somebody's giving us sound advice, because they're telling us, Brother West, is the right way to do things, and we get bothered and we try to shoot the messenger. I think I heard Brother Curry say, Mr. Curry say last week that he didn't want you to shoot the messenger. You know, sometimes, as I've said before, my grandmother would send me with a message to my cousins. Tell them that they need to come and do their chores. They need to wash the dishes. They need to do this, or they need to do that. Sometimes I would go and tell them, you better go get them dishes washed. And they wouldn't move. And I go back, I tell my grandmother, they didn't move. And she asked me, she said, well, did you tell them that I said? I said, well, I better go back. She sent me back, and then I go back and say, Granny said that you need to go and wash them dishes. And when I talk in her name, then they realized that they needed to get up and move and do what they were told to do. When I come to you on Sunday morning, now I understand it, because the more you get used to people in pastor church, you realize that in the epistles, you will read where Paul would say, this is me, Paul, a servant called by Jesus Christ. He announced and he allowed people to realize that I'm not coming to talk about me. I'm coming merely to tell you what God has said. Don't shoot the messenger, but accept the message. Let me tell you today, don't think that I come in my own spirit or my own mind to say to you that you need to be ready, that you need to reserve some space in heaven. I'm not coming in my own mind, because let me tell you, some days all of us have the same condition. There are days when I sit lazy. There are some days when I possibly through my actions, through my words and my deeds, I deny what the Lord is telling me. But I realize at the end of the day, when we look into the text, when we accept the words of Christ, and that means we need to get up and make ready. Because the Lord is coming back again. Jesus has been sent. His blood has been shed. He has died for us. And each of us has a responsibility to be ready when he returns. The question is your life ready for a return from God? Are you thinking that God's return will be a long way from now? But I tell you that the seasons have begun to show us that there's some signs that God shall return. I tell you, what your president calls Rocket Man over in North Korea, wars and rumors of wars remind us that his coming might be soon. Let me tell you that as we think of the way that the seasons are changing and we are not really able to fully understand why it's warm today and cold tomorrow is a sign that he shall soon return. So the question is, are we ready? Have we made space? Have we preserved? Have we said, God, I'm ready to come to you? Well, it's not so easy as they make it when reserving for some reception or some wedding. It's not so easy that you've been given a self-addressed envelope in order for you to stick your card in there and check off the box, because it is more than just checking the box. It is a lifestyle that says I'm ready. And so we can't shoot the messenger, but not only not shooting the messenger, look at verses 11 and 13. It says, and when the king came in to see the guest, he saw there a man which had come with came not. So I put my glasses on, I tell you exactly what it said. And when the king came in to see the guest, he saw there a man which had not on wedding garments. And he said unto him, Friend, how comest thou in hither, not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Let me tell you how the RSVP with God is never reject the king, what the king has made. Beware of making light. Don't hurt the messenger, but you better come right. See, there are some who have shown up, but they didn't come right. See, there are some folk who believe that just because you come into the church that you're ready for God. Just because you woke up at about 10:45 and rushed to get ready and got in the church somewhere around 11:30 and you said, I'm here to sing and praise God, that doesn't mean that you're ready. The fact is, you might be here, but you're not ready yet. There are some who have come close to God, but they're not with God enough to realize that there's a kind of respect and reverence that the Lord demands and commands of us. Just because you got at the end of the line does not mean that you're ready. I guess this is my morning to tell some stories about me and my grandmother. Back when I was young, there was what they call a cheese giveaway and butter giveaway. In other words, they would give you a cheese subsidy. Back then, Sister Vicki Williams, macaroni and cheese was some of the best thing you ever had, because black folk had plenty of cheese. And so they would give you a big box, a brown box, and there was a block of cheese in there, and you would stop when you would see a line at any kind of community center, you would stop and get in line. You get in line and you would get to the front and you would get your cheese, and if you were really lucky, you'd also get a block of butter. But one day my grandmother and I, we were out and we got in one of those long lines. We got up to the front of the line, and since we were both together, they gave her a brown box and they gave me a brown box. These were different boxes that we had never seen before. They were a little bit shorter and a little bit lighter. Didn't seem like the cheese that we were used to. We got back to the car because the old folks say you ought not look a gift horse in the mouth. So therefore we didn't open it right there in front of the folk. We got to the car and we opened it, and there was a sandwich, some potato chips, a fruit pump, and a little dessert in there. We had gotten in the lunch line instead of the cheese line. Sometimes you got to realize that you might be in line, but you're in the wrong line. There are times when you need to make sure that you're in the right line for the right reason and ready in the right way. And so just because you're here, just because you're near, does not mean that you're fully with God. So we've been invited to the marriage feast. We've been invited to be in community and connection with God. He's calling us not only to come, but when you get there, you better be right. In other words, not right as in I've got to be perfect to come to God, but what I need to be is humble in His presence. I need to be be ready to receive. I need to be ready to what? Respect God. Because what the word says, what this final verse says, it says, for many are called, but few are chosen. And so I tell you, in order to RSVP with God, you need to never reject what the King has made. You need to realize that you got to be aware of making life. Don't hurt the messenger. You need to come right, but then you need to respect the choice. What do I mean by that? When you wake up in the morning, you ought to be glad that you've been chosen. You see, God has chose you. You've got to think about, for those of you who are married, when you were first married. When you wake up in the morning and you look and you realize, I used to wake up and I would look at Sister Kelly, and every now and then I still think about when we were younger. Because the fact is, she would be asleep and she didn't know that I was a midnight stalker and creep. Because oftentimes I would look over and I would say, Lord, what did I do to deserve to be married to such a beautiful woman? But the fact is, you ought to thank God that you've been chosen, that God chose you. You know, my children used to act a little crazy every now and then. And I remember one day having a conversation with my daughter, Jasmine. I said to Jasmine, I said, you know, I've got two kinds of kids. I've never treated them any differently, but that they realize that I've got a biological child, and then I've got children that I acquired because I married. I said to Jasmine one day, I said, you got to realize that you're better than biological. She looked at me strange, and I said, the reason that you're better than biological is because my biological child I had to accept just because he's mine. You, on the other hand, I chose you. I didn't have to marry your mother. I married her, and I was glad that I have the children that I have today. You've been chosen, and so you ought to be glad that you've been chosen. Let me tell you that we were born of the enemy. We had deep, dark stuff inside of us. The Bible says born in just a few days full of trouble. But God looked at us while we were yet sinners and allowed Jesus to die on an old rugged cross. Blood shed for you and for me. He died while we were yet sinners that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, God has given to you his greatest thing. God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son. Because of that, you've been called to the supper. You've been called to the marriage feast. You've been called to be better, greater. You've been called to be family. You ought to be glad that you've been chosen. There ought to be a shout in this house that you were chosen. There ought to be a shout in the house that you have been chosen, a royal priesthood. You've been chosen to be a member of God's family. He paid for it with his very own blood. And for that we ought to be glad. And so can you RSVP today. Can you say, God, I'm on my way. Please reserve a place for me at the table. God, I'm on my way. And I know your son Jesus said there are many mansions. I'm waiting to live in one of them. I'm glad right now. I've got joy in my heart. I've got bells ringing, music in my ear. Just to know that someday you will call and we will answer. In that great getting up morning, fare thee well. Some glad morning when this life is over, I'm going to fly on away from here. Glad because God has died on the cross for me. But glad that he rose on the third day. So how can I reject him? I must say thank you, God. Be glad that he has chosen me to RSVP. Amen.